Welcome to the Love Government. I'm Dennis Leary. I'm the founder of the Love Government, so you're very welcome to this series of videos on sex signs. This is the 4th episode. I'm doing them more or less in sequence, so I'm going to build on what went before. And we have been talking about the love culture, which is the foundation for the Love Government, in terms of Africa, where our species appeared, where we were born 100,000 years ago. We're directing our attention to that time and that space. This is something that's going to make sense in the overall presentation. The title of this is Sex Signs, and I haven't been speaking much yet about what the actual sex signs are that will guide us on our journey towards love. But that will all fall into place as time goes on. It's very important that we get a sense of where we came from, because that's going to tell us where who we are, and that's going to tell us where we're going. It's like we have a gift, an advantage, if we know where we were born and some of the circumstances of that, and when it happened, and who was around, who our parents were, what the conditions were. It gives us a grounding in this earth. We're given a name, and you can probably picture the town or the place where you were born, and then we celebrate that every year. It grounds us in this earthly reality. Otherwise, we're going to be floating off. I don't know who I am. I don't know what my name is. I don't know where I belong. What's true of us as an individual person is true also of us as a species. All of us put together as a human species, as we say. If we don't know where we came from, if we don't know the circumstances of our birth, who gave us birth, who were our protectors, our parents, what was the, we're kind of afloat. We're not grounded in the earth. And in these videos and in the Love Government, we are going in this direction, down to the earth. We want to keep our feet grounded on the earth. Otherwise, we're going to be floating up into the heavens, so to speak. Our heads are going to be in the clouds, and feet also floating up. We have no grounding, and that's a large part of our problem. We don't know the true story of where we came from. So I'm attempting to tell you and me, again, the true story of where we came from, and therefore where we're going to go and who we are. We were born, and the scientists even tell us that, and the myths tell us this, and our own intuition, if we're sensitive to it, will tell us that we came from the tropics, the warm climate, where we're young, free, innocent. We didn't wear clothes, and we ate basically the same food. We were vegans, mostly raw vegan in the beginning, 100,000 years ago. So we didn't have too much to do like we have today. We have to work, make money, raise a family, do this, do that, pay taxes, obey the police, go, join the army, whatever. None of that was there. We had very little, if any, work to do. We went out and picked our fruit. Like today, we're filming in a garden here. It's too early in the season yet, but a little later I'll be able to go out and pick fruit off the tree. Right now I can go out and get some vegetables. People have planted vegetables here. We can eat the vegetables. And that's what the love culture was about. In the tropics, you went out and you picked your food, or you dug it up, roots, seeds, berries, whatever was available, and it was available in abundance in that climate. So there's very little work. Maybe there were little gardens. So what did people do? Well, what did they do? That's a good question to ask. What did they do? What did you do with all your time? They bantered back and forth. They had their own type of language. They had sign language. Bantered back and forth, had fun together, played. Children are running around, being children, getting into everything, playing games, jumping around. And the women are sitting talking back and forth, bantering back and forth about the children and about the menfolk. And the menfolk are probably out doing whatever menfolk do, maybe building something or looking out or going visiting the next villages or telling stories. See, people at that time told stories. And we still have traces of that. The Garden of Eden story was told by the people in that long, long oral tradition. We are storytellers because that's how we understand ourselves. Today we still have stories. We have short stories and movies and all kinds of television things. Still, we love stories more than we probably love a philosophical discourse. Philosophy is one thing, logic is one thing, telling stories is another. So these people sat around, they told stories about themselves. Naturally, just like us, wonder where did we come from? Or the child asked the mother, where did I come from? And she doesn't say, back that time, she didn't say, a stork brought you in a little bundle and dropped you here. No, you came out of my body. They were more frank about things. You came out of Mama's body. Oh. Usually the child doesn't want to know too much more than that, but so the people wanted to know, where did you come from? Where do we come from? And so that is where we get into the origin stories. Where do we come from? Answers that question. And we're doing that right now. We're living here in 2013, and this is being filmed in sunny Southern California, and we're asking the question, where did we come from? Where did all this start? And we're saying, it started once upon a time, a long time ago. It started in a place called Africa. We came out of Africa. And that's what I'm doing now, telling the story of where we came from and what were we like. So the people of that time did the same thing. So let's try to get a sense of what their own origin story was. Can you get the point? It's like one step removed from what we're doing today. We're trying to figure out who we were and what story about us is going to explain things to us. Let's go back another step and say, okay, 100,000 years ago, what were the people of that time? What were the stories they told about themselves? Where did they come from in their minds? To know that, we have to use whatever resources we have, which is what stories are extant now. What stories do we have? There's lots of stories in the old cultures about where we came from. But the love government is telling a story that has more to do with love. And we're going back to the love culture to kind of speculate, I guess, and derive and put it all together as to where they came from. Now, as we said before, the main value they had was the beautiful, all-attractive woman of that culture. Her body was spectacularly beautiful, but not only that, it was the vehicle by which they survived. The woman brought forth the life almost by, I'll get into their mindset, by magic. This baby comes out from her body almost by magic. Now this is before the time they figured out that the man had something to do with procreation. Eventually they figured it out. The ladies are sitting around talking and they say, you know what? There's something about, I had sex about 9 moons ago with George. And then I didn't have sex. And now 9 months later I have this baby. And the other woman says, I know that there's something about that 9 moon thing. You have sex, and then 9 months later the baby comes. Well, this is take a long time to figure this out, but eventually they figure it out. The man has something to do with the baby. But before that, the baby just appears. And it appears when the bleeding stops. You know, the ladies notice that every moon I have this blood coming out of me. And then when the blood stops coming out of me, they're saying 9 months later, after the blood doesn't come out, the baby comes out. So they're thinking, they're beginning to think. And it's mainly the women who are beginning to think, because the woman's brain is multifaceted, multimodal, multifunctional. Why is that? Because there's a lot going on in a woman's life that's not going on in a man's life. First of all, she's got to go out, get the food. Mainly, men help, but, the woman's job, go out and get the food. She's got to know all the herbs. She's got to be able to tell a poison mushroom from a good mushroom. She goes, gathers the food, herbs. Her brain is doing. In the meantime, she's also raising the children. She's got a child in her left arm, carrying the child, and then she's working with her hand, and she's interacting with the children and the other women, and then the other men folk. She's interacting with them, plus nature. Men mind, the way it developed, is more focal, more focused on one thing. So the women are figuring this out gradually. Their minds are developing. A lot of it has to do with the moon, because their menstruation is in tune with the moon, and then the moon is ebbing and flowing. It's waxing and it's waning. And what's that all about? And then they begin counting. So they figure out counting by the moon. And we still count by the moon somewhat. Like Easter is a moon thing. But most of us now count by reason of the sun. But for the women, the moon was really, really important to them. Really important to them. So eventually the women realize the men have something to do with the production of babies. Now they eventually will tell the men. Big mistake. To tell the men was a big mistake. I mean, it couldn't be prevented, of course, but why was it a big mistake to let the men in on this secret of sex? Here we have a sex secret, a sex sign, because what happened? Why do I laugh? It's not laughable. I just think the humor, there's a humor of it. See the humor in it, right? The men will be saying, when they learn the facts about sex, this is like Sex Ed 101. When the men learn the facts about sex, what? You mean I have something to do with the making of the baby? That gives them ideas. So I'm the one that's important. And this is a slippery slope down to patriarchy. This gives the men the idea how he can wrestle power away from the women, because I make the babies. And you take that idea to an extreme, which patriarchy does, you better believe it. And any woman who is educated in the field will not only believe it, but will abhor it. That men will use that to take power away from the woman. I'm the one that makes the babies. Forget about the fact that she carries the baby for 9 months and she breastfeeds it for 4 or 5 years. It's the man who makes the baby, and therefore he is going to assert his fatherhood. All right, that's another long story, so file that away under a sex sign of some sort, and we'll get back to it. And we're going to keep on going here. Thank you for listening to this episode number 4 in this series on the sex signs. Have a great day.